across its amazing 23-film story, the Infinity Saga was never short of fantastic and memorable moments. So as the MCU continues to shift towards new stories, let's take a moment to reminisce about the past, and count down our picks for the top 10 moments in the Infinity Saga. As mentioned, this saga is filled to the max with incredible moments, and shrinking it down to fit within a top 10 list was difficult. So just because your favorite moment isn't on here doesn't mean we don't love it. It just means that there wasn't room for it on our list. Now, before we get into the top 10 list, let's reveal some honorable mentions. These are also excellent moments within the MCU, and they almost cracked the top 10, but were just slightly beat out by other ones. Dormammu, I've come to bargain. Doctor Strange. The climax of Doctor Strange gave us a much different final battle than what we are used to in the MCU. Instead of punching the main villain really hard or hitting him with a laser, Doctor Strange instead beats Dormammu by annoying him. Strange activates a time loop and tries to bargain with Dormammu, but Dormammu instead chooses to obliterate Doctor Strange without a second thought. As the time loop repeats, Dormammu starts to enjoy killing the Master of Mystic Arts in unique ways, while Strange gets progressively more and more annoyed that the big baddie won't listen to what he has to say. It ends with Dormammu finally being too annoyed by Strange and the time loop, so he chooses to take Caecilius and the other Zealots back into their dimension and leave Earth. While it may not be the most epic moment in the MCU, it is certainly among the most fun and hilarious, especially on repeat viewings. And while it couldn't make the top 10, it is at least worthy of an honorable mention. I am Iron Man. Iron Man. It's still insane to think that Robert Downey Jr. improvised the final line of the first Iron Man film, given how important that line still is to the franchise. There are so many better moments, but this is an honorable mention because it simply cannot be ignored. It totally changed the game. For years, superhero stories always had the hero hide their identity, but the ending of Iron Man opened up a whole new can of storytelling potential. And we finally get to see what it's like when the world knows a superhero's identity. Yondu's funeral. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Who cried at the ending of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2? Be honest. James Gunn's beautifully crafted sequel to the 2004 film ends with Yondu getting a Ravager funeral after sacrificing himself to save his son, Peter Quill. But that with Peter and Gamora having a moment, Drax and Baby Groot learning to accept each other, the other Ravagers honoring their fallen brother, and Rocket realizing how mean he was, all while Cat Stevens' father and son plays in the background, and you have an unforgettable ending to a great film. It's still unbelievable that the final shot of the movie is a CGI raccoon crying, and it's even more unbelievable that the CGI raccoon makes us cry. This was close to making the top 10, but it was just barely beat. So now that the honorable mentions are out of the way, let's get into our list. Number 10, Iron Man vs. Thanos. Avengers Infinity War. This fight was the moment that 10 years of storytelling and character development was building to. Seeing the MCU's main hero go toe-to-toe with the antagonist Marvel had been building up for years was nothing short of breathtaking. And the moment doesn't get less exciting on rewatches. A fully powered Tony Stark fights a Thanos that has 4 Infinity Stones and had spent the last 15 minutes throwing the Avengers around like action figures, and dropping moons on them. But with all the odds against him, Tony Stark never stops fighting. Thanos would not tire, but Stark would not let that stop him. Even after Thanos destroyed Mark 50, leaving Tony only a few scraps of armor, he still did everything he could to stop the Mad Titan until he pulled a sword on Thanos, and Thanos used it against him. Plus, Tony Stark is the only non-godlike individual who made Thanos bleed. A feat so impressive and hard to do that even Thanos himself was impressed. All these things alone are worth making it on the top 10 list, but the fact that Tony made it a full minute and a half going up against the most powerful being in the universe pretty much seals the deal as this being one of the MCU's top 10 best moments. Number 9. Vulture is revealed to be Liz's dad. Spider-Man Homecoming. The gasp in the theater at this moment was unforgettable. Spider-Man Homecoming is one of the most lighthearted and child-friendly MCU films, and it contains one of the cinematic universe's best twists. The entire movie builds up to this moment, and in fact, rewatching the film, you can see hints all throughout the movie of Vulture being Liz's dad, but the script does a great job of hiding them from the viewer. And then the movie distracts from the Vulture conflict by showing a montage of Peter getting ready for the homecoming dance. A happy moment. All of that build up to a happy moment just for the man that opens the door to be the guy that Peter had been fighting the entire movie. But when the scene gets inside, it gets even better. Peter acts so awkward in this scene because he's too focused on Adrian Toomes to focus on Liz. It is extremely funny while also being extremely intense. There is no music, no color, just anxiety and the anticipation covered up with comedy. Hats off to the entire cast and crew for making this moment great. Number 8. Airport Battle. Captain America Civil War. Captain America Civil War's title fight is essentially a recreation of the time in everyone's life when they grab all their action figures and just throw them at each other, sending figures and their accessories flying all over your parents' family room. The airport battle is the ultimate comic book fight. It is 18 minutes of people in silly costumes punching each other in creative ways while they all joke around with each other. The fight is executed perfectly, with it showing each of its heroes individually and introducing Tom Holland's Spider-Man to the MCU. It then transitions into a much larger scale battle when Vision arrives and Ant-Man turns into Giant Man. And the fight ends with Falcon ducking out of the way of Vision's blast and War Machine falling out of the sky. The action and excitement never dies down for the entire duration of the 18-minute fight scene, and it is one of the fights that the MCU fans will never forget. In 10 years, we'll look back on the airport fight with just as much appreciation as we have in 5 years since the film has been released. If you're enjoying this so far, please take a second to subscribe to our channel to help us grow. Thanks. Number 7. Steve Rogers' Happy Ending. Avengers Endgame. Does it contradict the movie's established time travel laws? Yes. Can an argument be made that it nullified Steve Rogers' entire character arc? Sure. Is it still a fantastic and bittersweet moment? 100% yes. At the end of Avengers Endgame, Steve Rogers goes back in time to return Mjolnir and all 6 Infinity Stones from the timelines that they were stolen from. And he reappears on a bench as an old man. He is happy, he is married to Peggy, and finally seems at peace for the first time in the entire franchise. He then gives Sam Wilson the shield, and the mantle of Captain America with it. And the final shot of the film shows Steve Rogers and Peggy Carter finally get the dance that they had planned all the way back in 1945. Such a bittersweet moment. It's nice to see Steve Rogers finally happy after all those years, but on the other hand, as Sam Wilson said, I have to live in a world without Captain America. Number 6, Thor becomes worthy. Thor. Phase 1 deserves some praise on this list too. The moment when Thor gets his power back is a moment that can give anyone chills, and it never gets old. When Loki sends the Destroyer to Puente Antiguo, Thor gives his own life to save Jane and all the others. And just as he dies, Odin's words about being worthy come back and Mjolnir blasts out of the ground and into the God of Thunder's hand. He regains his powers and costume and proceeds to single-handedly defeat the Destroyer. Kenneth Branagh's original Thor film is one of the often forgotten MCU films, and that makes this an often forgotten moment. But it is a great moment and one of the most important for Thor's character arc. Plus, Patrick Doyle's soundtrack is excellent and makes the moment even better than it already is. Number 5. The Dance-Off. Guardians of the Galaxy. Much like Doctor Strange's defeat of Dormammu, this is a very unique final confrontation in the MCU. Ronan the Accuser is about to decimate Xander with the Power Stone after a failed assault by the Guardians of the Galaxy and the Nova Corps. And just at the moment when the planet is about to be wiped out, Peter Quill starts dancing and singing along to Ooh Child. The moment keeps getting stranger and stranger as Ronan gets more and more distracted, and it transitions into Peter asking Gamora to dance with him, only for him to play it off when she very clearly declines. And while many people wouldn't consider the moments after it as part of the dance-off, they might as well be. Quill says he was only distracting Ronan so that Drax and Rocket can blow his axe apart, and then Quill catches the Power Stone, which leads to a very emotional and dramatic point in the film. The moment when Peter sees his mom again as the Power Stone pulls him apart, and then the Guardians all group together to use the Power Stone against Ronan and gain the official name, the Guardians of the Galaxy. It's a funny moment that transitions into a very emotional one, but it isn't a distracting change. It feels natural and is very well done. And it is very deserving of a spot on our list. Number 4. Thor arrives in Wakanda. Avengers Infinity War. The most exciting moment in Avengers Infinity War was when Thor, Rocket, and Groot used Thor's new axe, Stormbreaker, to transport themselves to Wakanda and completely shift the scale of the battle against Thanos' forces. At the start of the film, Thor loses half his people and his brother and then spends the next hour and a half on a quest to get Stormbreaker. Meanwhile, the Avengers and the Guardians do everything they can to hold back Thanos, but nothing works. At this point in the film, the Outriders are overpowering the heroes. Black Panther, Steve, Bucky, and even Bruce Banner and the Hulkbuster are taken out in the fight. But then, the Biofrost comes down and Thor, Rocket, and Groot come out of the portal. The Avengers theme kicks in and there's a sense of hope that the Avengers have a chance of defeating Thanos. It's just a shame that hope didn't last. Number 3. Captain America lifts Mjolnir. Avengers Endgame. At the beginning of Avengers Endgame's third act, Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor have to hold off Thanos all by themselves. They fight as a very tight unit, but Thanos begins to gain the upper hand. Thor throws his hammer, and Thanos uses that as an opportunity to take out Iron Man by lifting him up and holding him in the path of the hammer, and that knocks him unconscious. He then throws Cap aside and grabs Stormbreaker and starts pushing it down into Thor's chest, and the God of Thunder is not strong enough to push it back away from himself. And just then, Mjolnir is lifted out of frame, it hits Thanos, and then flies into not Thor's hand, but Steve Rogers' hand. Steve Rogers lifting Thor's hammer was the accumulation of 8 years of character development and build-up. And it is the perfect example of what Marvel does best: fan service through story. Avengers Age of Ultron had Cap wiggle the hammer, and it was played off as a joke for the scene, but 4 years later, Cap actually lifts the hammer. But the best part is that he doesn't lift the hammer just for the sake of lifting the hammer. He lifts it because Iron Man is unconscious and Thor is about to be killed with his own axe. It's either Cap lifts up the hammer or they all die, and it is the climax of an arc. The ultimate good guy being shown as worthy enough to be king of Asgard. Number 2. The Avengers assemble for the first time. The Avengers. In the final battle of Marvel's first Avengers film, Banner shows up late to the party. The heroes are losing a battle, and just then, Banner reveals that he is always angry and that he can in fact control the Hulk. He uses his immense strength to stop a massive Leviathan in its tracks. Iron Man then destroys it with a missile. Once the explosion is gone, the Avengers circle up and a roar from the Hulk, paired with Alan Silvestri's score, signals the first true assembly of Earth's mightiest heroes. This moment symbolized that Marvel had accomplished something unprecedented in creating a successful cinematic universe. A universe that just about every other big blockbuster franchise is trying to replicate. Even though it was outdone by future movies, the first time the Avengers assemble will always be exciting. It will always be iconic, and it will always be remembered no matter how long the MCU continues to go on. But it is not the number one moment. Number 1. Portals, Avengers Endgame. It does not get any better than this, and it probably never will. The entire MCU was being built up to this moment. Cap gives it all he's got as he stands alone with a broken shield opposite Thanos and his entire army. You think all hope is lost and that there's no way on Earth Cap is going to make it out of that fight. So when Falcon said, "On your left," it completely blew people's minds. One by one, every hero comes out through portals created by Doctor Strange and the other sorcerers. We get hero shots for everyone and a huge build-up to the reveal of Spider-Man. But the scene doesn't just end with the heroes coming through the portals, it also reveals Giant Man, War Machine's new armor, and a battle-ready Rocket. And on top of that, we also get to see the payoff of the rescue armor earlier in the movie when Pepper Potts lands on the battlefield in her own Iron Man armor. And the portals moment ends with Steve Rogers summoning Mjolnir and finally uttering the wonderful phrase, "Assemble." Soon, every MCU hero, all the Asgardians, sorcerers, and Wakandans charge towards Thanos and his forces. And as a bonus, we get Alan Silvestri's new rendition of the classic Avengers theme over the entire sequence. This scene is the ultimate payoff. It is paying off 22 movies and 11 years of investment. It gave us one of the greatest theater experiences of all time and is a scene that still gives us goosebumps on rewatches. Just simply one of the greatest moments in all of comic book movie history, and we doubt that the portal scene will ever be topped. And that does it for our top 10 moments in the Infinity Saga. If you think we missed anything, be sure to let us know in the comments. And thanks for watching.